Welcome to Backyard Farmer. I'm Kim Todd, and I'll be your host for the next hour of answering all those gardening questions. We have another great show for you tonight. If you'd like to join us with your questions on a future program, just send us an email to byf@unl.edu. Tell us as much as you can about your question, including where you live. Please keep in mind we can't get to everybody's questions on the air. You can watch those past programs and features on our YouTube channel. You can join our legions of fans on Facebook. So let's get started with some samples. And Jody, you said you didn't want to touch that, but here you are.
Yeah, I do it for the show. I do it for all the viewers. I hate being sticky, but everyone out there is also getting sticky. So we have these problems on oak trees, maple, elm, and what the problem is my tree is leaking, my tree is dripping, something is sticky. So they're actually aphids, so it's caused by an insect. And if you can see this leaf or turn over any of the underside of your leaves, you'll see small little bugs. They're like a little green color, some of them have wings. That's an aphid, and what aphids do are they suck the plant sap, and the sap is really sugary, it's not high in nutrients, so they feed nonstop, and what they do is they secrete the excess honeydew, and that's very, very sticky. And that's the problem, because it gets all over your patio furniture and your cars if you're parked underneath. And then it's a breeding ground for sooty mold. So is that a fungus bacteria? It is not good. So that's something that people don't want to have. But if you're wondering why your leaves look really shiny, why everything is sticky, and it is very sticky, it's because of the aphids.
Jody.
Very sticky, very sticky. But this is what you can do. Well, clean off the honeydew of your furniture. Try to do that as often as you can with a hose. You can also use the hose and spray them, with a strong stream of water. What will occur, because the population is really high right now, there's a lot of natural enemies on these plants, and so you can take a look here. I've got some lady beetle in different forms. There is the larvae, there's the pupal case, and there's an adult. These will feed like they're very happy feeding on aphids. You will see lacewing larvae, you will see spiders, you may see a bunch of different natural enemies that are gonna take that population and bring that down. So it's not worth trying to spray with a broad spectrum insecticide, because not only will you kill the aphids, but you will kill all the natural enemies, and odds are they will rebound in higher numbers than they were before. So this is just to show you that, it's drippy, it's sticky, and it's icky, and it's happening not just to you, but all your neighbors, friends, and some of these are actually from the Backyard Farmer Garden and from my house.
All right, thank you, Jody. All right, Lauren, you have kind of an array
This
of...
is so fun, though. I could just see kids coming in covered with those leaves
With the
and just
leaves.
having a great time. That's awesome. So in my backyard, actually, I have a large apricot tree, and it's an older tree, and I brought along a problem that it is having as a result of that really cool snap we had later in the year this year. Normally this tree leaves out really well, but this year you can see I got a lot of dead shoots, and I've got other limbs that kind of look like this. And then if you look close at these, I've got branches that are doing this, where half of them are dead. And then we're going to zoom in here on this little area where you've got some resin, or gummosis, as some people would say, but it's really an excretion of the sap and a buildup there. And that's an area where the branch has been infected. And so all of you know the brown rot disease that we see in our stone fruits. So cherries, peaches, apricots will all get brown rot as a fruit disease. But that fungus will also overwinter and grow on the bark of the tree. So then when we get a significant stress event, like we had this year, and the tree is older, you can see a significant portion of that tree die and fail. So in this particular case, there's really not anything to make applications to try to protect it. And it's just one of the things that can happen when you have a significant environmental stress and you've got an organism that's living all over a plant, and then it just succumbs that way. So.
All right.
Unfortunately, my wife's not real happy. We're going to take the tree out probably.
do it when she's not home.
Yes, I think so.
All right. Kelly, you have an absolutely beautiful
I do.
specimen.
I do have a beautiful specimen. This came from one of my master gardeners, Marilyn Schmidt, and she shared it with me, and I was very happy she did. This is an Allium Christofi. I was going to say it's as large as my head, but I think it's bigger than my head. This is, again, one of the alliums, so that's kind of in the onion family. It's a bulbous perennial. This particular one will grow, it's supposed to only grow about 2.5 feet tall, but Marilyn says hers gets about 3 feet tall. And it blooms in May, June, early June, May. And she commented that I have two here, so I don't know if you can kind of tell this one right here is a little bit smaller. And she said usually the first year they bloom, they'll be about this size. And then each year thereafter, they just kind of continue to get larger and larger and larger. So that's a neat characteristic. The foliage will die back after it's finished blooming. Star of Persia is a common name, so they're non-native. They're not native to Nebraska. And they are kind of an everlasting. So these heads will keep for quite a long time, even after they've finished blooming. And Marilyn shared she's seen people spray paint them and use them at weddings. And they will reseed. They produce a seed, and they will reseed themselves, but they spread nicely, not invasively.
Yeah, that's just excellent for her to share that with us. All right, first round of questions. Jody, this is a Johnson, Nebraska viewer, and your first picture is a white pile at the side of the garage door, and it extends up the metal track. They also found an ant, which is your next picture here, in the same area, and they're wondering if that white pile of stuff is the work of those carpenter ants, and if so, what to do.
Yes, that was very good detective work. That is the frass of carpenter ants. They do not eat the wood. That looks like, is it insulation or is that paint? But if you look at that frass and you see insect body parts, it's a pretty good sign that that has been kicked out of galleries from carpenter ants. And then that one, the picture of an ant, that is a worker. Most times if people can take a good picture of an ant, it's usually a carpenter ant because they're bigger. If that is where the nest is, you'll be able to treat it directly, or you can call a company to do it. It's something that you will want to either drill a hole there, or if you can find out where the majority of the workers and the larvae and pupa are, then you'll be able to get rid of that ant nest. But the clue is going to be above where that pile is.
All right, thanks, Jody. And your next two pictures here are from Broken Bow. This is an oak leaf mountain ash, which is a little unusual anyway. He says many web clusters, and there are very tiny small white worms that eat the leaves and the buds. Wonders what this is, and he did say it's a bad infestation last fall as well.
Okay. I couldn't really clearly see any of the worms, but after talking to Scott and other horticulturists, they are known to have some like worminess in those clusters. It might be fall webworm if it's something that's happened in the fall, and if they're at the end of the clusters. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot you can do in terms of trying to spray it out. I did see a daddy longlegs on the first picture, so maybe there are some predators out there trying to eat them.
All right, thanks, Jody. All right, Lauren, your first three pictures are a tree, your very favorite.
Love trees.
This is an elkhorn viewer. Had this Serviceberry planted 2 years ago. He thinks he's been taking care of it properly, but it's beginning to fail, and it seems to be spreading to the whole trunk. He's wondering what it is, what to do about it, or does he give up and start over?
This picture right here is really key too, because you can see with a disease called Fireblight, a lot of times we'll see a shepherd's crook at the top or where that branch goes down, and you can see that in this picture. We'll also tend to kill some of the twigs. So from looking at it, I think that's what it is. And the other one had a real black, sometimes they'll have a real black color to those shoots that are dying. And Serviceberry is known to get that. I just recommend pruning out about 7 to 10 inches below the affected area. Make sure you're using sanitation consistently, and hopefully you'll be able to get it under control.
All right, and your next two pictures are an Austrian or a ponderosa pine. This is in Keith County, south of Lake McConaughey. 10-acre lot, about 100 pines, mostly Austrian. He's had 4 of them do this. The candles are stunted. He's sprayed with a liquid copper fungicide. What do we have going on here?
Well, and in this particular case, if you look, the candles may be stunted a little bit, but they are really green. So I'm questioning, I don't think this is a disease, first of all. There's way too uniform damage on the tree for it to be a needle disease that we would see in those second-year needles, like you can see the browning on these. I would really just watch this carefully and see what happens. My forecast would be that the candles will continue and grow out, and maybe you may have these plants that are extremely dry. Maybe there were some drought issues. These may be the trees in the planting that are planted too deep. And so look carefully at that, see if you see that trunk going straight into the ground compared to the others. It may have a flare. All those types of things can lead to stress that then when we see a real harsh winter, we get to we really get to the point where we see that extreme environmental injury.
All right, thank you, Lauren. All right, Kelly, your first 2 pictures are from Bennett.
Okay.
This is a paperbark maple, second season here. Still had a lot of leaves in April of 2020, got some new leaves. Now this year, all it's done is this. So, and the leaves are turning black. Are anything they can do, or is this a losing battle?
It looks like a losing battle to me. I'm sorry. If it looked fine in April of 2020 and it looks this bad now, then I'm sure it's a winter injury, winter kill, like we've had on many plants. Paperbark maple is not really drought tolerant, so last year we had pretty droughty conditions, and maybe that's what set it up. You know, we never know for sure why does one winter kill and one does not. It can be seed source, it can be parentage, it might be drought stress, but too much percentage of it appears to be dead, and it's after June 1st, so I don't have high hopes for this tree.
All right, your next one is a 9-year-old dogwood that also looks half dead or dying. No problems until this year, no indication of insects, and this is rural Blair. Same thing here.
Same thing. It's most likely winter injury if it looked fine last year. So, but it's a shrub, and shrubs you can prune out all that dead wood, and they'll regenerate some new growth from the bottom.
All right, and one more. This is a summer snowflake viburnum. These are 3 years old. This is here in Lincoln. They did well last year, and then one did this, flowered, and then by August had died. Now this one is sort of doing the same thing, they think. Bottom is green and growing. What's going on?
Okay, so they had said one had done it in August. It had died back actually in August.
Yeah, the one, she lost one,
The
so.
viburnums. Well, I mean, when it died last August, then we really can't say winter kill on that one.
Right.
So, and I don't know, do viburnum get verticillium wilt? They're probably maybe kind of young for
little
that
bit.
one. So maybe with some of our stresses, they could have been infected with verticillium wilt. But again, being a shrub, the key, as long as there's green growth there, the key is to prune out what's dead there. It looked like there'd been some pruning already, but I would prune what's left. There's still some dead wood there. So go back in and prune out everything that's dead and wait and see.
All right, thanks, Kelly. Well, if some of your trees are dropping their leaves and looking a bit thin these days, you might have anthracnose. We've seen some of our trees here on campus have some trouble with this disease. Here to tell us more is Kyle Broderick.
One of the things that we've been seeing quite a bit of this year has been shade trees that just have some black spots on them, or the leaves are coming out rather deformed. What we are seeing is shade tree anthracnose. So anthracnose is a very common fungal disease that infects most of our shade trees, whether it is a maple, an oak, sycamore, ash, walnut, hickory, and I could go on. But pretty much all of our shade trees are infected by a type of anthracnose. Now, one of the nice things about the anthracnose fungus is that it tends to be host specific. And so the type of anthracnose that infects your maple tree will not infect the ash tree nearby. Now, this disease tends to be favored by cooler, wet temperatures. And so when we have a long, protracted, wet spring, as we've had this year, we tend to see a lot more issues with anthracnose. And so when we have those temperatures in the 50 to 60 degree range, with adequate moisture, that fungus is very active. In fact, the fungus can even infect while the leaves are still inside of the bud. When that happens, we do tend to see some issues that occur on the veins. And as the leaf veins are one of the first things to mature inside of the leaf, that's where the fungus can attack. So one of the symptoms that we may see with shade tree anthracnose is just some discoloration along the veins. And it may be especially evident if we look on the back side of the leaves as well. Now additionally, we may see some larger black splotches that also occur, especially if the leaves are infected very early. Now, depending on how the season is going, we may have severe anthracnose infection early in the season, but certain trees will put out a second flush of leaves and really kind of cover up any of those leaves that may have already died and dropped, or have become so unsightly that you don't want them there. Now, unfortunately, anthracnose is one of those things that we really just need to learn to live with. It's not something that we see every year, so it really is highly dependent on our environmental conditions. And we really don't recommend doing any sort of fungicide control, especially for a tree in the landscape. Now, if we have a young tree that we are just trying to establish and we have had severe anthracnose infection for 2 or 3 years and we've seen at least 50% leaf drop, then we would maybe want to start thinking about a fungicide application. But in general, for established trees, chemical control is not necessary. Now, some of the controls that we can do, one is sanitation, so making sure that we are raking up and destroying any of those leaves that have dropped. The other thing that we can do that really helps control anthracnose is to prune out some of those heavily infected branches. The anthracnose fungus can survive as a canker on the branches, and so pruning out those branches and twigs that are severely infected will tend to cut down on disease incidence next year.
So do a good job of sanitation, maybe some pruning of those heavily infected twigs and branches. Keep a sharp eye on those younger trees. So Jody, answer this question, please. The first here is Waverly, Iowa. It is black specks on her asparagus. She harvested from the garden, put them in a grocery bag in the fridge, and then found these black specks.
Ooh, okay, so what they are, those black specks are actually, I want to call them deflated or no longer viable eggs from the asparagus beetle. So those have been on there and you probably picked them and put them in the bag, and so they're no longer alive, but that's what they were.
So a little bug protein with the asparagus on the
Yeah, a little
sauté.
bit. You can probably still eat that.
All right, so your next one is a viewer from Omaha. She was growing eggplant from seed. She put them outside to harden them off. Something started eating them. And she's saying, can you see those thousands of tiny little holes? But she couldn't see any insects. She did use insecticidal soap, and it's the second year she's had this issue.
Yep, these are flea beetles. They have that characteristic shot hole just all over the leaves. They're really hard to see because they're really tiny, but they jump like fleas. That's why they're called flea beetles. If they're no longer there feeding, then nothing that you treat with is actually going to help. But they should grow out of that if it puts on more leaves, and it should be okay.
All right, thank you, Jody. All right, Lauren, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 in a row that are all cool from 4 different people. The first is Omaha Benson, and this stuff showed up in the old silver maple.
Beautiful.
Turns more orange. What is it? Should he be worried about it?
Well, do you want to just go through the other? Are they all the same?
Well, then
This
your
is-
next picture
look at
is
the other pictures.
Yeah, your second picture here is Wilcox, Nebraska. Due to the weather, I'm thinking this probably is a fungus. Your third picture is deep yellow eggs on grass. This is Reagan, Nebraska, and saw these all over. Many little patches of grass with these eggs on them. And your fourth one is actually a mushroom picture.
Okay. So first, let's talk about the ones that have the bright colors of the gray. These are really common in the landscape, and we see them a lot of times when there's rains. These are slime molds, and they're really amazing organisms. They're just living on the organic material. They're not doing anything bad. You can wash them away with a hose if you'd like to. They'll usually reoccur. So all three of those, these on the grass blades, same way. These are just these little seeds, or these eggs are just some of the little structures that are produced by the slime mold. So same thing here, just a different color. And then the mushrooms, we really can't tell exactly what they are from the picture. So I think they ask about hay mushrooms or grass mushrooms. From the way they look like they may be an agaricus species, but I hate to say without looking at a full cap and letting them expand and see that what it is. But I believe also they were concerned about a pet eating them maybe. I would just recommend trying to pick them out if you can by hand if you have a pet in the yard, and just avoid allowing them to eat them without knowing what they are.
All right, thanks, Lauren. And that was Kozad with the mushrooms, by the way. All right, Kelly, your first one is a Hildreth, Nebraska viewer. Has a big leaf hydrangea. She's wondering if the high nitrates are causing it to not flower very often.
Well, that is an issue with big leaf hydrangea. They don't bloom as well as we think they're going to bloom. So excess nitrogen, if that's what she's asking, the excess nitrogen can cause that, as well as they bloom on more mature wood too. So pruning in spring can also reduce blooming, but they don't really live up to expectations. So, but
right.
Watch the nitrogen and be careful when you prune.
All right, your next two pictures are a Grand Island viewer. They have a Northstar dwarf cherry leafed out, bloomed, and then it does have canker, Lauren. They wonder if they should pull this one out and start over or try to give it a go.
Yeah, it had a lot of sticky stuff on the trunk, and we call that gummosis, and trees will get, especially fruit trees like cherry and peach, will get gummosis in response to stress, and it might be mechanical stress, lawnmower injury, for example. It might be environmental stress can lead to this, but some diseases and insects will cause it as well. So, for example, some of the borers will cause that, and cankers. So this tree, if you want to try to save it, then I would get rid of that, what looks like cement border, and I would put about a 4 to 6 foot diameter ring of mulch and then hope for the best and water deep. But
right.
It's maybe too far gone.
All right, and you have one more quick one here, and this is a peach. Tiny ants on all the branches and brown mushrooms on the base, and this, also a goner.
Okay, brown mushrooms on the base, yeah, that indication of maybe some decay. I think it's a goner. We call that, it's kind of sticky and icky, so we call that gummosis as well. And again, it's an indication of a stress.
All right.
So, a goner.
Right. Two former trees. We finally have our garden planted and immediately needed to get some water on it. We've had some really dry days here in eastern Nebraska, so watering is going to be critical. Here to tell us more from the Backyard Farmer Garden is Terry James.
This week in the Backyard Farmer Garden, everything is planted and everything is starting to look really great. Remember, the bottom half of our Backyard Farmer Garden is a mix between annual flowers and vegetables. So we have those great combinations of textures and colors that are gonna look fantastic later in the season. We have had to do a little bit of extra watering to get everything established. It's been very dry here in the southeast part of the state in Lincoln. We're making sure we're watering early and letting all those leaves dry off so we have less likely to get any kind of diseases. Remember, East Campus Discovery Days is this weekend, June 12th, and the Backyard Farmer Garden is going to be open and master gardeners are going to be here. So come by and visit us and talk to us this weekend, June 12th from 10 to 2 on East Campus.
Right now it is time for the lightning round. Kelly, you are first up.
Okay.
All right, this is a Falls City viewer who wants to know how to kill poison ivy in her asparagus.
Be very persistent. Be careful, and be very persistent. You can clip it off, or you can spot treat it with Roundup. But be extremely careful that don't get the sap on you.
All right, this is a Donovan viewer who has two different apples, and they're 20 years old, but the Harrelson apple blooms very poorly and has very little fruit. Any ideas?
Old age.
All right. Another viewer wants to know whether Incrediball and the other Annabelle type hydrangeas will rebloom if you take a percentage of the top of the flowers off.
I don't think so. Mine do not.
All right. This is a Seward viewer who wants to know whether we can grow loblolly pine in Nebraska.
I think it's on the Nebraska Statewide Arboretum list. So you can give it a shot.
All right. A York viewer wants to know what is the best time to put down preen in the flower beds?
When there's no weeds there and the soil's moist, and then put mulch on it, but usually in spring sometime.
All right. Nice
And you might
job.
have to repeat.
Nice job. Okay. I was waiting for lunch meat.
Oh, you didn't ask me, am I ready? Oh, yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm not going to be on before the 4th of July, so I'm ready as a lit firecracker on the 4th of July. How about that?
All right, lit firecracker. Your first one is from North Platte. There are yellow spots on the leaves of a 17-year-old autumn purple ash. What are the yellow spots on ash trees right now?
Oh, many of our ashes get rust, and I'm thinking that's a rust disease. If you look at the underside, it would have yellow on top and then pustule underneath.
All right, and what
Don't do anything about it. It's going to be a cycle in the landscape that just enjoy it.
This is a Lincoln viewer
Trying to win.
who wonders why the raspberries are turning brown and hard instead of ripening.
A couple things. If they're watering a lot, you could have botrytis blight, which will infect the young fruits and blossoms and will take that out. With that, there are some different fungicides that you could look at, but the first thing I would do is avoid overhead irrigation and make sure you're using clean sanitation methods in the cycling of the fruiting.
All right. Is there a disease of basil that would cause spots on the foliage?
Yes,
And what is that disease?
I believe septoria.
All right. Peonies are
Avoid
covered.
overhead irrigation.
Peonies are covered with powdery mildew. Treated or not?
Spray with a hose. Just free moisture can reduce powdery mildew growth and infection. So
All right.
Just a nice organic way to try.
Nice job. All right, Jody, you're up.
Okay.
This is a Carney viewer who discovered an insect of some sort eating multiple quantities of her plants. She then discovered it was slugs. What will kill slugs in the garden?
You can trap for them using beer or sugar water, or you can use they do have commercially available slug bait that works.
All right. This is a Papillion viewer among many who are asking, is it time for grub control?
If you have a problem with grubs in the turf and you've surveyed and that's what you want to protect, then yes. However, if you're trying to protect against Japanese beetles, that's not necessarily going to happen if you're trying to protect against the adults because they might not be in the turf.
All right. This is a Plattsmouth viewer who is wondering about bagworm treatment. They typically do 2 applications 2 weeks apart.
What's the question?
Is it time?
I haven't seen any caterpillars at this time. I've looked, still looking. Keep monitoring.
All right. Is the new 99% effective EAB injectables worth the dollars?
Is that the amamectin benzoate?
Sure.
It does work, and it can work for more than the 1 year. So, but I don't know when it comes to worth. I would probably replace the tree. Depends on the quality, how well the tree's doing, and if it's worth treating.
Excellent. All right. Thanks, Jody. All right. Plants of the week, Kelly.
Okay, well, we have 2 bee balms this week. There's Prairie Gypsy is the darker purple one, and the lavender one is our native bee balm, Monarda fistulosa. And some people will call it wild bergamot. So beautiful and great for bees. And then, of course, we also have a tree here. This is linden, just starting to get ready to bloom. And another great bee attractor, often called bee trees, but this is linden, and there's an American linden, there's little leaf linden, there's also a silver linden, which is a beautiful one in the Arboretum here on campus. So if you've never seen silver linden, I encourage you to look at it or check it out.
Excellent. And they smell so good this time of year. All right. Thanks all. Jody, your next round of questions is a what is it, what is it, what is it? So your first one here is a Fremont viewer found this insect on a flower pot in the deck. Good guy or bad guy? Both.
I think a lot of things are good. This one is a dark flower scarab, so it's just a beetle that feeds on flowers.
Okay. Your
So I
second
feel like flowers don't want
Well,
that,
it's
right?
usually in the big trees that have like the flowers in there, not necessarily like the plants, but
All right, it's a tree flower eater.
it's not worth treating for.
Your second one is an Omaha viewer. This one caught their eye from far away. What is it?
It's really pretty. It's called a rainbow scarab, so same family, but this one is a dung beetle. So something so beautiful can feed and live in poop.
Your third one is also Omaha. She says this looks like a blister beetle, but it's larger and has these orangey striped legs. Will this one mow down the flower vines?
No, it shouldn't. It is a flower longhorn beetle, so the larvae develop in wood, and then the adults are like feed on flowers, but it shouldn't mow anything down. I would say it's more good.
All right, and your final one is two pictures of a spider. This is a Gretna viewer, wonders whether this is one that they should warn their children not to touch.
Well, okay, you can not touch it, but this is a fishing spider, so the genus is Dolomedes. I mean, they're big, they're large spiders, but you know, spiders are really only where there's prey, and we are not that, so.
All right. Okay, thank you, Jody. All right, Lauren, this is a Gehring, Nebraska viewer who has a maple, 8 years old, struggling to grow. He thinks it's iron deficiency. I think we have two pictures on this one. One, and the leaves get these black spots. So what do we have going on?
Yeah, I really do think, and especially in Gehring, that could be an iron deficiency thing. And in many of the landscapes out there, you see that. So I would, from looking at the pictures, recommend treating it for iron deficiency.
All right. Your next one is a Lake of the Ozarks viewer. This is also a maple. Wonders what type of fungus is among us on this one.
Yeah, this one's neat. Actually, when you zoom in, there's really large black spots on it, and I believe this is tar spot on maple, which is a disease that overwinters in the residue. So if you can just do good fall leaf management and work at it that way, that's what I would do. Look up tar spot.
Tar spot. All right. Your next one is a Lincoln viewer, and could be many Lincoln viewers. Significant leaf curl on the bur oaks. Some are normal, some are shriveled. What's the deal?
Yeah, so we're seeing a lot of herbicide injury, which that could be. But if there are leaves that are apparently healthy on the tree, and you're just seeing some of them cupped like this, it could be some of the aphids or something that Jody was talking about earlier.
All right. Okay, Kelly, your first one here is a Hastings viewer. This is a new willow called Iceberg Alley, and last year the bunnies chewed it down. She fertilized it. She put pepper around it, but now it's starting to curl, and she's had the lawn sprayed. Wonders whether maybe it's herbicide or is this just, what's the deal here?
Okay, well, yeah, this is a really nice new willow that gets about 3 to 6 feet tall and is wide. It's a pretty one. It has that silvery foliage, so you want to try to save it, hopefully. If the leaves are curling, cupping, distorted, there could be some herbicide injury. With any herbicide injury, we say to check other plants in the landscape because usually one plant isn't affected. If you're getting some browning in there, it's a willow, it tolerates wet soils, but if it's a heavier clay soil or something, that could be an issue. So be careful of overwatering. Those would be some suggestions.
All right. Your next one is an Omaha viewer who wonders what's causing the purple in the iris rhizomes.
Okay, well, the foliage looks otherwise healthy, so sometimes iris will do this, especially if we have cool weather or cool sunny weather in the spring. Sometimes they will do it. There's even some breeders that are trying to breed them so they have completely purple foliage. And I think that's all it is. And even the American Iris Society has a list of cultivars that tend to do this. So I think it's just environmental and they'll be fine.
All right, and your final one is an iris that didn't bloom, dug up, replanted. The rhizomes are above ground. They look healthy, but they still didn't flower this year. What's the deal?
Okay, well, I mean, it has really, really healthy, great foliage, so sometimes excess nitrogen can lead to, a lot of vegetative growth and not as much reproductive growth, which would be the foliage. If it has some nearby trees or shrubs gotten larger and caused shading, even really dry weather in late winter, early spring can sometimes affect blooming and iris. So those are some possibilities.
All right, thanks, Kelly. Well, we've talked about choosing a good professional arborist service to handle big trimming jobs around your home. There are plenty of YouTube videos out there of extremely dangerous situations where amateurs are getting hurt. Let's take a few minutes to see why it's important to let the big jobs be done by the professionals.
Just get on the internet and search tree fails and you'll see homeowners up on ladders cutting with the chainsaw and a big branch comes down and sends them flying across the yard. And doctors aren't cheap. I mean, yeah, if you look at the price of a tree service, sometimes you're like, wow, it's a lot of money, but they have the insurance, they have all the tools they need to do it safely, and they know how to do it, because there's a lot that can go wrong. The backyard lift, it's a night and day difference from climbing. I mean, climbing is extremely dangerous, takes a lot of time. You got to take a lot of extra precautions to get up in a tree like this and do it safely. With the lift, I can push 4 buttons and go all the way 60 feet in the air with not even getting tired. I mean, it takes a little extra time to set up sometimes, but once you get it set up, you can just float up there. I would say climbing takes a lot longer to get good at compared to a lift. I mean, like I said, there's 4 buttons once you get it set up to make it move. There's a lot of things you need to know about how to set it up, but climbing, there's so much more that you need to worry about and think about, because I mean, you're literally 60 feet in the air hanging from a piece of plastic, and you got all this gear that you have to inspect to make sure it's good to go. So I mean, much easier to learn how to use a lift. You can train pretty much anyone how to do it, as long as they're not scared of heights. Yeah, for my crew, we usually have 3 people, sometimes 4. We have another crew that does more big projects, like big removals. So they usually have 4 or 5. The Alternamats is what they're called that we use. They're plastic. I think it's made out of high density polyethylene. They allow you to use your equipment like this, and even if the ground's wet, if you put them down, you can drive on it all day and you won't ruin someone's yard, because our customers really care about their grass most of the time. So it makes a night and day difference, because otherwise we'd be dragging this all out by hand and I'd be climbing this just because it rained all week. So they're well worth it.
Small pruning and trimming where your feet are on the ground is totally okay to handle, but when you get into some of those bigger jobs, it is really highly recommended that you do some research, get a good arborist to handle that work. All right, next set of questions. Jody, this is two pictures here of tiny caterpillars on an onion leaf, and they must be tiny because that's a bottle cap. What are they, and do they need to be controlled?
These are salt marsh caterpillars. Just pick them off. I don't know if it's worth.
Salt marsh caterpillars.
Yep, they turn into a moth.
All right, never heard of them. So your next picture here is just on the ground near a variety of plants and weeds. And what are these? This is probably the first of many of these pictures, I would guess.
Yeah, so the salt marsh caterpillar, and actually these are called, they're all collectively called woolly bears, but these are the yellow woolly bear, it's the Virginia tiger moth. So, you know, as caterpillars, they're all gonna be pests because they need to eat plants. So
All right.
just pick them off, do what you're doing.
All right. Let's see, Lauren, tomatoes with curly tops.
Awesome.
And this particular viewer is in Papillion. We had 3 or 4 again this week with the same thing. Herbicide damage, curly, what is this?
I would guess in this case that we're looking at herbicide damage because it's twisted and so much in the curvature of it. This is just something that's with the drift, with the higher temperatures, any application. So really want to encourage our viewers not to make applications when those temperatures are really above 80 degrees. You can really have a lot of drift injury that way.
All right, so how do you tell whether it's curly top?
Well, there's a couple things. So one would be if you have several plants and all the plants look this way, you know, you feel pretty confident it's a drift event. That way, if they're all the same. If you just have one out of a growth, there's a good chance it's a virus. Now, the other part is if you just have one tomato plant, that's where it's always challenging. But extreme distorted growth like that is definitely going to be a herbicide, because typically our viruses may grow and be, you know, rugose and roughness of the leaves. It'll just be on the new growth, and that would continue. Where this, you'll see this growth and it will continue too, but it'll be really severe, and then it may get lighter as new growth comes out.
All right. Your next picture here, and we actually got this from 2 or 3 different viewers this time, and it's rhubarb leaves. 2 plants, 5 to 7 years old in a raised bed. They've never looked like this.
And there's several foliar diseases of rhubarb. This could be, one is ascochyta. In any event, the management on this would be to selectively harvest, if you're in that second year of growth or more, selectively harvest those stems that have affected leaves like this if you're in the harvest time. Avoid overhead irrigation, and then make sure you're managing residue in the fall and removing all debris to get the inoculum out.
All right, and your third one is Omaha, questionable rust on hollyhocks.
Hollyhock rust is so common, and this overwinters. This is one of our rusts that actually cycles on the same plant. So any residue of the hollyhock in the soil will result in more infection next year. So make sure you're using sanitation at the end of the year. You can use fungicides, but wow, this is really hard to manage. Kim, one thing I want to highlight, some of our viewers may be coming to the Campus Discovery Days this weekend, and I just want to encourage you to, if you're having a problem in your backyard, bring along a sample. We will have the diagnostic lab is going to be there, and Kyle Broderick that you saw earlier on the show in the video is going to be there, and some of our students from plant pathology and myself will be out, so look for the tent that says plant pathology and stop by.
Excellent, and that way our master gardeners can send them to you if they have a question on a rotten spot.
Absolutely, yes, send them on over. It'll be a lot of fun.
All right, thanks, Lauren. Okay, Kelly, your last round of pictures. We have two from different viewers. The first one here is from Springfield, and the second is from Stromsburg, and they are of the same plant. So what is this particular plant?
Well, this is Western salsify, yellow goat's beard, and some people even call it wild oyster plant. And this is an introduced wildflower. It was brought here by the immigrants as a food plant because the taproot can be eaten or was eaten and kind of tastes like oyster, which is why they call it a wild oyster plant. And it is, naturalized, so it's not a bad plant. It's a good plant.
And it looks like a monster dandelion.
Right.
Beautiful.
When it's in seed.
The seed head it does, a monster dandelion seed head.
All right, and your next two pictures are, she says it's a weed, but, and it can be, they spread underground. When you try to pull the young ones, they break, and then you can pull and the root comes up. She's tried some strange things, mix of vinegar, Epsom salts, and dish soap to kill them. She thought she maybe tried Roundup. It is the blanketed green. What do we think this is?
I do not know what that previous picture was.
It's the same plant.
This is the same plant?
Yeah, that's the leaves and
well,
the
and this is the kind of the flower head. Well, this one looks like ladybells. I can't say it. Adenophora, help me.
That's it.
Something like that.
You got it.
But ladybells, and this is one that is considered an ornamental. It blooms in May, and it has really pretty purple bell-shaped flowers, kind of on a spike of a plant. So, but if it's spreading not nicely, then you just have to stay on top. If you don't want it, all the things that you're doing, you just have to keep on doing, or stop and start enjoying it. Maybe let it bloom and see if you like it.
Yeah.